Good evening. My name is Brad Baker. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. When we first sat down and talked about this, we had no idea the numbers we were going to get. And it's just amazing to see all the families that have come out. I'm the founder and the CEO of a group called the Bradley Intervention Center. We work with families whose loved ones are struggling with drugs or alcohol or behavioral issues. Our mission is to work with them to provide opportunities to get help, to hold them accountable, and to also provide assistance to the families. Because the families are going through this just as much as the children are. And if the families don't know how to help them without enabling them, if they don't know how to provide for them without giving to them, and if they don't know how to support them without drowning them, it doesn't work. Tonight I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking to the parents about some of the things that we see, some of the things people in my group see that have been the roadblocks and the obstacles that they first have to overcome. We call it the 4 stages. Because let's face it, nobody really wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, my son's an addict, let's have an intervention. Because that doesn't work. You have to go through and really decide, what is it? Are you willing to make this commitment for somebody to go to treatment? Because it's not 28 and done. That doesn't work, people. It's a commitment on behalf of the family and all those who support the family before you do anything. But most of the time when we get in front of families, we go through some stages with them, and the first stage is always denial. And you've heard it already tonight. It's not my son or daughter. It's not my community. It's not going to happen here. And I'm telling you, it is happening here. In the last 3 months, myself and other people who work in my group and in other groups have worked with at least 20 families. And the majority of them have been either alcohol or heroin. So if you think it's not your child or it's not in our community, I'm standing here to tell you it could be your child. And it is in our community. The next thing that we hear is usually reasoning. Reasoning of, well, it's only pot. And as you just heard from the judge, today's pot is not your dad's pot. Today's pot has got stuff in it that you don't even know about. The synthetic pot that they're making, the pot that's mixed, that's cut. Drug dealer has this much pot, but he needs some extra money, so he cuts it and he fills it with this. It's not just pot anymore. Most people that we work with, the young adults or the adolescents, always tell us, at some point, I was introduced to pot. They also tell us at some point, I was introduced to alcohol. A state of Georgia study that came out showed that asking students, the students said the average age of starting to drink was 13 and a half. So if you think, well, it's okay, it's just alcohol, and they're doing it in my home, so it's safe, I know they're not out on the roads. Alcohol and pot are leading our kids down a path. And that path right now is going to meth, painkillers, opiates, heroin. And nobody can believe where these kids getting it. We live in Forsyth County. It shouldn't be here. They're getting it from your medicine cabinets. They're getting it from your refrigerators that are in your garages. It's all around us. But parents are still in that phase of reasoning. It'll be okay. If I just get them off to college, everything will be all right. My son's over there, and I'm saying the same thing. But here's the problem. You have a child who's struggling with drugs or alcohol. or a behavioral issue, who's cutting, who's had something traumatic happen in their life, and they're using. And you're saying, if I send them away someplace where there's less structure, less accountability, and more freedom, everything's going to be just fine. Parents who engage in my service that have kids that are in college always say, I wish I would have done something when they were younger, when I could do something. Most of you here today are still at that stage. Some of you, both ways. But you have to realize there's always something to do. Which brings us to our control phase. Taking away iPads and cars doesn't do it. Knowing where your child is going. When they say they're going to a party and spending the night at somebody's house, figure out if the parents know about it. Figure out if the parents know that kids are bringing water bottles full of vodka through the back door in backpacks. Figure out if the kids are leaving and going out in the woods and smoking pot and then coming back. Get engaged, get involved, be in the know, because they're your kids. The more you push them, and the more you try to put control and curfews, the more they'll push back on you. You're feeding a train, and you're just feeding it, and finally that train is going to run off a track. So then you come to the help piece. And here's where it takes a community. People say all the time, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know where to turn to. I didn't know where to get help. There's people sitting up here that you'll hear from later that'll tell you that. There's people sitting out here in the audience that I personally know that will tell you that. There's resources out there. You can call me. You can call the sheriff. You can call the judges. You can call the panel up here. You can call Cindy. You can call people. You can call John Smoltz if you get his number. If you do, give it to me. We need to talk about it. There's resources out there. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a community that will no longer worry about the stigma of substance abuse and addiction. That will no longer worry about going to Sharon Springs baseball field or West Forsyth baseball field and say, oh, there goes that lady, her son's an addict. But instead we'll go up and say, how are you doing? What's going on with your son? How can we help? We need to change our mindset here. So, in closing, again, I want to thank you for coming. But I also want to make a statement and a challenge to you. My statement is that I can't tell you again how many times I work with families and they say, I just didn't know. This is a great community and we've got a great opportunity. So my challenge for you is when you leave this building, I want you to commit to me that you'll be the one. That you'll be the one that will talk to your neighbors. That you'll be the one that'll talk to people at school, to your families, to people at church, to people at work. That you'll be the one that will stand up and say, guys, there's a problem, let's do something about it. Again, if you don't have the answers, that's fine. We have the answers. There's therapists all throughout this county that have ways to work on the answers. But we need you to be the one to take the stand for our community and to step up and say, this isn't going to happen any longer. Thank you. God bless.
Well, Brad just told my story, so I can probably sit down. We were one of those parents that had no idea what was going on. First, I want to say thank you, especially to Cindy Mills, to the school board, and to our new sheriff, who is amazing. If you haven't met him, please say hello. They really are the reason that we're here. We've had struggles with our kids for some time and wanted something to be done in the county, and just were unable to get anything started until now. So this really is all them. A lot of counties around us have the same problem. This is not a Forsyth County problem, but I have not seen the other counties pulling together coalitions like this. So we are blessed to be in this county. We are blessed to be in a small enough county that's run by people that really care and have some really good programs to offer, that they're all going to work together. But they need a lot of help, and that's what they're asking for tonight from you. This is a community effort. We heard, we've been spreading the word about this meeting tonight, and my husband heard someone say, well, it's not really a school problem. Well, it's not a school problem, but your kids are at school longer during the day than you see them. And if they have sports after school, you really don't see them as much as their peers do. So we really need everyone involved to be able to help. It's not that this is the school's problem, and I'm sure Buster will attest to that, but everyone needs to be involved for a solution. I'm Sherry Angeluni, and I'm a Forsyth County parent. My husband and I have 6 children. We know all too well about the influence of drugs in our children's lives. Our 2 oldest boys started using marijuana and alcohol in high school. We were very involved in their lives. My husband coached them. We tried to stay on top of where they were. We attended every game or activity they ever did. We raised them in church. We tried to do the right things. We talked openly about drugs as much as we knew, which honestly was very little. And we talked about sex. And honestly, I was more worried about them having sex than drugs. That was just never really on my radar. We had 0 tolerance for drugs. We tried to control their behavior, even more so when we found out they were using. But all kids are not just experimenting. When you find your kid smoking pot and you think this is just a phase, I did this when I was young, they are not all just experimenting. And we found that out with our own kids. 1 in 4, about 25% of us, has a tendency towards addiction. That's a lot. 1 in 4 of us. Look how many people are in this room. 1 in 4 of us is an addict. Most people have addiction somewhere in their family tree. Look back at your parents, your grandparents' generations, aunts, uncles. There's probably more alcoholics than drug addicts, but that's quickly changing now. It's just like allergies. You don't know you have allergies until you're exposed to what you're allergic to. That's how drug addiction works. You don't know you're an addict until you start using drugs or alcohol. Addicts react differently to drugs or alcohol than non-addicts. Their high is much different than a non-addict. They get addicted much faster. And so no matter what we tried to do, our 2 boys continued to experiment with harder drugs until we discovered in 2007 that they were using heroin. Our 2 babies that were afraid of blood tests were using heroin. We caught the kids looking messed up, and they kept saying they were just smoking pot. We knew better, but we had no idea what it was. Luckily, I was working with a nurse at the time that started talking about how she knew her nephew was using opiates because his eyes were pinpointed. And I went home and told my husband, that's what our kids' eyes look like. So of course we're instantly looking up opiates. What are they? Didn't even know that much. Found out they were painkillers, which of course the kids said they were just taking pills at the time because addicts like to downplay whatever they really are doing. We took them to a counselor, not knowing where to turn. The counselor agreed to help them. He should not have. He should have said, "This is way above my pay grade," but he didn't. So they continued to use. Later that year, they went to their first of several drug rehab centers. They were in and out of rehab for years. I can't even describe the devastation to your family that's caused when your child has this disease. Lots of families deal with children with other diseases, and it's similar to that, where that diseased person gets more attention, except that most diseases are not brought on by our own bad choices and actions, and this one is. So the entire family gets angry. Their siblings are angry, the parents are angry, the entire family becomes sick. You look around at your neighbors and friends and you think, why are we the only ones with issues? What you don't know is how many of us there really are. It's just that no one is talking. You get resentful. You can't plan a family vacation. You can't plan anything because you don't know what's coming next or where they'll end up, whether they'll be in rehab or not, whether they'll be visiting Judge Jackson, who we know. He may not remember me, but I remember him. And he's very good. They've stolen from you. They'll rob you blind, your own children. It's amazing. And so you really don't have the money for vacation anyways. There goes the college money, and you begin to mourn. You go through like the stages of grief. You mourn for their youth that they're wasting when they should be having fun and graduating from high school. You lose hope that they'll ever get out of this, and you forget what normal even is. You see it in your neighbors, but it's not in your house at all. Your dreams slowly disappear. You spend way too much time trying to save them and not enough time living for yourself. You're immobilized. Your goal becomes to save them. Our boys lived on the streets. They stole. They lied. They went to jail, which sometimes you're like, thank God, because they're safe. Those was like the only nights I could sleep, is if somebody was in jail. These are middle-class kids choosing to live on the streets rather than at home because of this addiction. This was unbelievable to us. I'm generally a very positive, glass half full kind of person, but I've never felt so alone or depressed in my entire life. I couldn't sleep. I tensed up every time the phone rang, especially at night. You're waiting for that call that your babies are never coming home. I lived in shame and guilt for anything wrong I ever said or did. What did we do wrong? I was afraid to tell people because I thought they would think it was our fault. We went through this for 4 years. In 2010, Brandon had been through yet another rehab. He did well. He graduated from it. One of the few times he actually finished. And he went on to college. He wanted to be a high school history teacher and a coach. He wanted to help keep kids off of drugs. He talked about having a prevention program in the county. He wanted to come back here and work. Things were finally getting better, and we even dared to be hopeful again. He was going to school year-round. He came home for the 4th of July break that summer. I noticed he looked thin. He said he was just riding his bike a lot and that he would start eating more to make up for it. I was worried but thought maybe I was just being paranoid. He went back to school and shortly thereafter was arrested for shoplifting. He had been in trouble before, so this time he knew he was going to jail for a long time. I got a call from the college saying that Brandon was missing. I spent 3 days looking for him with detectives. On the 3rd day, someone found him. When I got the call to quit looking and come back to college, I knew he wasn't found alive. He had taken his life. He left a note saying that he just didn't want to hurt us anymore, and he didn't want to live in the hell he had created for himself. There's no explanation for the amount of grief you feel when you lose a child. I don't even remember much of the first few months. You literally can't function. When people say your heart breaks, that phrase is because your chest hurts for months. You feel like you're having a heart attack for months. You can't sleep. You can't take a full breath. I honestly didn't want to live. I prayed for God to take me, and I'm sure I'm not alone with other parents that have lost children. I pray you never experience any of this, and that's why I'm here telling you my story. And I need a Kleenex. Thank you, but you're not done with me yet. I know you're all here to find out how you cannot end up like me, and I want that. I want to help you prevent this with your children, your neighbor, or whoever you come in contact with. So how do you prevent drug abuse? First, stop thinking this will never happen to you. You've heard that tonight repeatedly. Stop thinking that. Acknowledge that you have alcoholics and other addicts in your family. This is proven to be a disease. It's hereditary, and it's possible for anyone. Understand that drugs are now easier to get for your children than alcohol. Overdose is now the leading cause of death among young people. You heard that tonight, I think. He's talking about car accidents. He's talking about our county, Sheriff Piper. This is nationally. This isn't just our county. Overdose is the leading cause of death. In our county, there have been 33 911 calls regarding overdose year to date. There have been at least 15 deaths this year to overdose in the county. Get educated. We didn't see the signs early. We didn't know what to look for. We wrote it off as craziness of teens. You know, everything was just normal and hormonal. It's not all. Go to a class, read online, know more than your kids do. Your kids are way smarter than you, or at least they think they are. They're looking online, but they're looking in the wrong places. Go get the right information so you can talk to them about what those drugs they're taking are really doing to their brain, how their brain is not developed until they're 25, and how they're stunting their growth. Start talking early. Start at least in middle school. Educate your kids on how one possession charge can disqualify them from college. If you don't have anyone going to college yet, when you fill out that application, it's going to ask you if you have ever been accused or convicted of drug use, drug abuse, drug possession, something like that. You have to check yes or lie if they've ever had a possession charge. Drug test them. We should have done this much, much earlier. And you don't have to pay for the $45 drug test at CVS. Go to homedrugtestingkit.com. Write that down. Drug tests are $10 for a 10-panel. Test them for everything. Even just have it sitting out in the house so that they know you have it. Maybe they'll be less likely to experiment. At least some kids will. Don't let your kids drink, and especially don't let other kids drink at home. Even if your child is not an addict, their friend may be. And you don't want to live knowing you got them started. Look for signs: change in clothing, change in friends, sleeping in more, missing school, a general lack of motivation. Don't trust them. They're liars. They say they're going to be somewhere. I don't even trust all the other parents. You can call the parents. The parents may say yes, they're going to be there, but they may still leave. Keep GPS on their phones now. We didn't have that back then. Work together as a community, like you're doing tonight. Don't keep drug use a secret. If you think your child has a problem, ask for help right away. If you suspect another child has used, tell their parents. People ask me that all the time. Well, someone used, but I don't want to get involved in their life. I'm just going to stick to my own little world. No. Tell their parents. If something happens to that child and they overdose and you haven't said anything, you're living with that. Encourage your kids to be open with you and to tell teachers or parents if one of their friends is using. This is life or death. This is not gossip. This is when the kids need to be telling on each other. Drug users do not fit into a stereotype. They can be jocks, scholarly, artsy, whatever. We've been in a lot of parent groups. There's a lot of good parents out there with drug addicts. We've also had some of the cutest, most well-mannered, yes ma'am kids at our house that were shooting heroin in the basement. So don't think that you can tell by looking at them that they're drug users. You cannot. The high school kids I've talked to in the county have told me the majority are using drugs or have used drugs. It crosses all income levels, all cliques, all areas of the county. These are good kids making bad choices. If you think your kids are using, get support. It's really tough to not enable them. You want to believe them, but trust me, they're lying. We're organizing a support group like Al-Anon, but just for parents. The first meeting's tomorrow night at 7. You should have information in your bags. And if not, you can see me after. Get support. Get your life back and get resources. You need to work with other parents that are in the same boat. You're not alone and you're not a bad parent. This is a great community. We're blessed to have it. I want all of us to work together to change the stigma of drug use from everyone is doing it to why would you do it? I'm Sherry Angelini and I'm the parent of a drug addict.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Daniel Krasner. My title is Clinical Solutions Provider. I work for a residential treatment program called The Ranch at Dovetree. And I'm kind of going to give you a brief synopsis on how I got there. I'm a drug addict. I'm in recovery. And I can promise you that like 8.5 years ago, nobody would let me speak up here with police officers right next to me. That's for sure. I'm from Marietta, Georgia. Grew up there, was born in 1987. I'm 26 years old. I've been sober for 8.5 years. I come from what I thought was like a pretty normal family. I got a mom, a dad, 2 sisters, a brother. Both of my parents worked. I had kind of like a nanny growing up till my parents got home from work, then she'd go home. I felt like my home life was pretty much normal for the most part. Growing up, my parents were the type of parents who basically, in my eyes, like today, I still think they're perfect parents after everything that I've gone through and they've gone through. And I don't think that they did anything wrong as parents. I don't think they were equipped with the tools or knowledge to know what to do any differently. But growing up, my parents were the type of parents who, attended field trips for school. They were always there for me at my sporting events, at my family's sporting events, at everything. And growing up, for me, playing hockey was one of the things that I liked to do. And going to school, hanging out with friends, playing sports, that sort of thing, it was fairly normal. I will say, like, when I was 7 years old, like, something happened with my sister where she developed an eating disorder, and my family hid that from me, and I didn't know what it was. And growing up, I always thought that, there was something, they told me it was from drinking coffee, and I believed that because I didn't know any better as a young child. And kind of progressing through growing up, everything was really normal. When I first started using drugs and alcohol, I was in 9th grade. I had no reason whatsoever to pick up a drug, a drink, or anything like that. And I had friends who were doing it. And I thought maybe it would be a good idea to try it with them. And I remember, I smoked marijuana the first time. It was a Friday night. I did not get high. I pretended like I was high. And then I went home and I sat in my mother's bed next to her while she watched TV, and I really wanted to tell her what I had done, but I was terrified of what she would say. So I just sat there with her for a couple hours, and then, I was over it the next day. And about a week later, I tried it again. I got high, and I loved it, and I thought, I want to do this every single day. And that was in 9th grade. So 6 months into 9th grade, basically, I had went from, smoking marijuana every other weekend to becoming a daily marijuana smoker every single day. And that progressed to trying some other drugs and trying other things. And, I got to speed this up a little bit, so I apologize. I'm just going to skip things. But basically, by the time, I was 15 years old, I was using cocaine, Oxycontin regularly on a daily basis. And I found out there were ways to skip school, and I started doing that. And basically by the time I was 16, I was addicted to Oxycontin. I didn't know that because for me growing up, I didn't have any real responsibilities. I had to go to school. That was about it. I didn't have to have a job. I didn't have to help provide for my family. I didn't have to put food on the table, anything like that. I had a pretty easy life. I was a spoiled kid from East Cobb is what it came down to. And I was able just to hang out with friends after school and do these things. And because of that, my addiction progressed very quickly. By the time, I was in the 10th grade, I was skipping school regularly. I got arrested for the first time when I was 16 years old. I got arrested for burglary. I got charged as a juvenile, and I was with a bunch of adults, and my parents sent me to a program for the first time. I got home from that program, went to a private school. I got kicked out of that private school because I decided to start smoking crack in the parking lot. Then I went to treatment again. And ultimately, I went to treatment about 5 more times, and then in 2005, I crashed my car into a tree. I was 18. I had become an IV heroin user. That was my drug of choice. I had been using it for about pretty much 2 years now, every single day, and I crashed my car into a tree. No, I was 17 when it happened. I got 4 felonies and 2 misdemeanors, and I went to jail, and my parents had to put their house up to get me out of jail. And my only thought in jail was it wasn't, hey, there might be something wrong with your life. It was, I really need to get out of here because I don't like the way I'm feeling and I'm starting to withdraw. There was no thought about my family or anything like that. And, I got out of jail, and my parents told me I was going to treatment again, and I was absolutely, that's not what I wanted to do. I thought it was a terrible idea. I'd been to treatment multiple times, so I jumped out of their car while they were getting off the highway, and I was in jail, so I didn't have shoelaces in or anything, so I couldn't really run, so they picked me right back up, and I had a little mini intervention, and I went to treatment again. I came home from treatment, and I made it 4 days outside of treatment before my parents kicked me out of their house because I started using heroin again. And I got put into, I had all these felonies, so my choices were drug court or go to prison or try to do probation, and I knew that I probably wasn't going to be successful at probation. And I remember them kept telling me at drug court, you have felonies, you're not going to be able to vote. And I kept being I wasn't really planning on voting. I think, I think this is going to be okay. It'll work out. And I went to drug court. I remember I signed a piece of paper. I remember this very clearly. They're you're in you're in our program now. If you have a urine screen, will it be clean? And I was yeah. So I peed in a cup, and it was really dirty. And I went to jail till I could, have a clean drug screen. That's the first time I went to jail where I could remember it, and I hated it. And I'll tell you, I got out of jail, and the drug court told me I was 18, and I was supposed to go to my senior prom in high school. This was my 5th high school I was in, no, 4th high school. And I went to prom that night, and I was sober, and I hated myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to talk to people. I couldn't relate to anybody. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin, and I wanted to kill myself that night because I didn't like who I was or who I'd become. And the only thing I knew what to do was to get high, and that's what I did. I went and I got high. I I went back to jail. I got out of jail again, and I started doing this drug court program, and I found out, this was in 2005, and I found out basically I could use Oxycontin and get away with it, and I did for a really like short period of time, and I ended up going to jail again. And they said to me, you can finish our program, get out of jail, or you can get out of our program and do your prison sentence, pretty much. And I said, like, I'll just go to prison. Like, I've been to treatment 6 times. And they were like, well, that's a pretty bad idea. And I wasn't really thinking clearly, like I said. And I went to jail, I detoxed, and like, I guess like 8 days later I woke up and I was like sober for the first time that I could remember in like a really long time. And like this realization hit me where I was like this white Jewish kid from East Cobb, and like I wasn't fitting in like I thought I would in here. And like I was pretty terrified, and I called my dad and I was like, listen, I got to get out of here. You got to do something. I want help. And I really didn't want help. I just really wanted to get out of jail. And they hadn't really kicked me out of drug court yet. And the judge was like, you can go to this one treatment center in Mississippi. And I was like, sure, I'll go. And so I went to treatment for the 7th time in 2005. My sobriety date's July 6, 2005. That's when I got sober. The last time I used a drug was in jail. I smoked pot in jail. That was the last time. My dad was driving me to this treatment center, and I said to him, I thought you weren't going to pay for any more treatment centers. And basically what he said to me was, I want to make sure I did everything I did for you as a parent before you die, because he was convinced I was going to die. I got into treatment. I was the youngest person there by like a good 15 years. I was balding, but like not like I'm balding now, like a balding, like unhealthy, like really malnourished, like yellow hair falling out type of balding, and really frail, like 140 pounds. I hadn't really eaten anything but like a McDonald's cheeseburger for the last 3 years, like one a day. And you know, I was there, and this counselor basically told me, he said, you're 18 years old, you're a heroin addict, you're either going to die or you're going to get sober, and it's your choice. And he made it really like plain and simple. And like, I'd gone to a lot of like adolescent programs, and nobody was like that like blunt with me, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. And you know, he gave me some things to start doing. He introduced me to like a God as I understand him, and I started praying, and I started doing some things, and they introduced me to a 12-step program that ultimately saved my life. And like throughout treatment, like when I got out of treatment, after like 90 days, like I still felt terrible about myself. Like when I woke up, like I didn't really want to get high anymore, but I hated who I was. I hated who I'd become. I hated how I hurt my family. I had this terrible like self-esteem. Like there was nothing like to be proud of in my life. My parents didn't want to talk to me because they paid for 7 treatment centers, and they thought they were going to get burned again. So I got out of treatment, and I got put into another drug court in the state of Mississippi that corresponded with Cobb County Drug Court, so they wouldn't make me come back to the state of Georgia, which ultimately saved my life. And I had to go to court every Tuesday for about 1.5 years. I had to do all the things you have to do in drug court. I went to a meeting every single day for 2 years. You know, a lot of things. And like the judges were saying, drug court did, you know, it was one of the huge things that saved my life. It kept me accountable when there was, you know, a lot of room to, you know, have a lot of free time. And I didn't have that when I first got sober. And I realized like what a felony was pretty quick when I got fired from a buffet for having a felony. Like I thought, like, this is not my choice job. Like, who works here if felons don't work here? And I got fired for having a criminal record. But I got involved with the right people, and for me, like I said, I felt like a drug addict. I felt really like, I just felt terrible about like who I was. And you know, I got a sponsor in a 12-step program that suggested like very strongly that I go back to high school and finish. And I went back to high school and finished, and I started going to college, and I worked. I had 2 part-time jobs. I went to school part-time. I got a dog. I got an apartment, and I started like living my life, and kept people very close to me. And somehow, like, I found this lady to start tutoring me, and she started tutoring me, and she signed me up for the ACT, and I did really, really, really good on it and got a full ride scholarship to the University of Southern Mississippi, and I went down there. And at this time, I had probably like 2.5 years sober. I was very involved in like a 12-step program, very involved in like helping other people get sober. You know, very, very proud to be in college and to be getting educated, because it changed the way I felt about myself. Because I felt self-worth when I could raise my hand and say, I know the answer to that, or, you know, whatever it was. Like, I was feeling good about what I was doing. Oh, and I went back to the state of Georgia and got all my charges dropped for having, you know, 4 felonies and misdemeanors, because the judges in Mississippi showed up to my court date and spoke on my behalf because of the work I had done with them and everything. So I had all my charges clear, and I went down to the University of Southern Mississippi for school. And a month into school, my mom called me on September 14th of 2008 to let me know that my sister had died of drug overdose. And I always said, like, if something happened to my sister, that was going to be the thing that kind of threw me over the edge where I was going to go and get high. And it didn't. Like, something took over my body and basically, you know, carried me and allowed me to do the things that I needed to do to take care of myself. And I went back. My parents were out of town on their 30th anniversary on a cruise, and they couldn't get back into the country. So I was like 22 years old. I had 3.5 years sober, and I went and I planned my sister's funeral and dressed her and everything. And you know, it's really unfortunate that that happened, and it saddened me, and it gives me a lot of passion for what I do today. But you know, I was able to be there for my parents for the first time, and they were able to see the man that I'd become. And after that, I moved back to Georgia. I was going to go to the University of Georgia, and I went up there, and I went to Five Guys Burgers and Fries, and like I saw a bunch of people from high school, and I decided like I didn't want to be around those people, and I decided to go to Kennesaw State and get a job in Kennesaw. And Kennesaw had a program for students who were in recovery. Then it was called the Collegiate Recovery Center. Now it's called the Center for Young Adult Addiction Recovery. And it's run by a lady named Teresa Johnston. And it's for students who are in recovery to go back to college. And I had no idea what it was, nor did I want to have any part of it. But they asked me to come speak one Monday night and tell my story. And my story usually lasts like an hour, not like 12 minutes. So anyways, like I went out there. I spoke, and like I really like enjoyed the people, because I went to college. I had been in college for 3 years, and like I never felt like a student except when I was in class. Like I didn't have any like friends on campus. Like I literally went to a 12-step meeting. I went to school, and then I got off campus and hung out with my friends who were in recovery, because there's tons of young people in recovery out there, like tons. And then when I went to Kennesaw State, like all of a sudden, like these recovering young people were like on campus, and you know, they were students, and they were trying to do the same thing I was trying to do, which was kind of like start over, feel privileged and honored to be a student, get a degree, and get a job somewhere. And basically, I became part of that program. My major was marketing and professional sales, and the lady asked me to go to Texas Tech, which started like collegiate recovery, and speak on a panel to the U.S. Board of Education. And I just said, are y'all paying for me to go? Because if you're paying, I'll go, but I can't pay for myself. And I went out there and I spoke, and when I saw what they had out there, you know, I was in shock. And they have a collegiate recovery program out there that's not like any other program really in the country, where like once a student has a year sober, like they'll waive your out-of-state fees, give you scholarship money, priority registration, guarantee your admission. They have their own major, they have their own master's program, and the cool thing is they've replicated the program, and they've put it at Kennesaw State and University of Georgia and Georgia Southern and Alabama. And you know, it's really neat to see like the whole collegiate recovery movement grow. But they let me go out there, and I spoke out there. And then I came back to Atlanta, and I was like on fire with this collegiate recovery thing, and I was really all about it. And the lady who ran the program I worked for at the time asked me if I wanted to come work there, and I was like, no, I don't want to work for a treatment center. Like I want to work for a hockey team. Like that was, but thanks for offering. Like, and then the Thrashers got sold, and I called that lady back and said, hey, is that offer still there? And basically, I went out there, and my senior year of college, I had a year left of school, and I learned more about collegiate recovery, and I had the opportunity to go work for a treatment center. And I did, and when the thing is, when I graduated college, when I had about 5.5 years sober, I was 24 years old, and the thing was, I got to pretty much start my life over at 18 years old. I had no life skills when I got sober. I got to relearn everything, developmentally, everything. I got to reestablish relationships with my family. I got to graduate college. I got to walk. I moved to New Mexico for a year, which is, I'm really glad to be back in Atlanta. But I lived out there, and the thing is that I love what I get to do for a living. I get to work with, families and help them find treatment for, their loved ones, regardless of, where they go. But that's basically what I get to do is, families call me and I get to help place them. And, the community of people who work in this business in Atlanta is, it's amazing. And there's other people in the room who do what I do. There's David Blackwell in the back, if you'll raise your hand. There's Kelly Grant here, and they do the same thing I do, and we all help place families with the same passion and as if they were our own family. And there's a lot of resources here, and there's a lot of parent groups here, and there's a lot of things you can do. But for me, my mom always comes up to me and says, she doesn't say this anymore, but she says, do you think there's anything I could have done differently for you or your sister? And I say, I don't think there is anything that you could have done differently, but what my parents do is they speak to a lot of families, and I'm very open about my recovery, and I speak a lot. And, a lot of people call me and just ask for help, and there's 12-step meetings all over the state of Georgia. There's tons of young people's meetings, and basically I would just, and I say, I'm not a parent, obviously. Well, I might be, you never know, but I'm not. And, I would say if you think that your child has a drug problem, I'm going to tell you this, that the last person they want to hear from is you. They don't want to hear you in their face. And I would really suggest, go take them to somebody who's in recovery and let them tell them what's going on and what it was like for them, because that can really change how they view things. And I thank you all for speaking and saying what you had to say, and thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you so much. Thank each of you for what you've brought to this meeting tonight. And we had planned to open the floor up to questions. I think since we've run really late, and a lot of you I know have got children, you want to get home, we'll go ahead and close the meeting with Dr. Evans, and then this panel will stay around, and any of you that have questions, feel free to come up and ask, because I don't want to keep you longer so you won't ever come back again.
Good evening. Thank you, Cindy. My name is Buster Evans, and I'm fortunate and privileged to serve as your county school superintendent. And I really want to applaud you for being here tonight, but I do recognize that I am in the unenviable position of being the only thing between some of you and a John Smoltz baseball. So I'm going to keep my comments brief because so much...
We can give out the baseballs before you finish if you'd like to.
They might leave.
Oh, then let's wait.
But we'll keep comments very, very brief. So much has been said tonight. You've had an opportunity to hear from people who are experts, people who are truly concerned about your children, people who are concerned about this community, people who have made it their lifelong mission to try to help the lives of others be better. And I'm grateful to be able to be up here on this stage with people such as this. This evening you've heard from those who've given us a lot of information. From our Cy Young winner, future Hall of Famer John Smoltz. Thank you for setting the stage, talking about passion. And that is one thing that sets this community apart from so many communities. Cindy, over 35 years ago, I was involved in drug prevention education, and throughout my career as an educator, I've never seen a community event like this, so thank you for your leadership in putting this together, and we owe you a tremendous round of applause for your work. During the time that I've had to know those others who are on the panel tonight, people like Sheriff Piper, Judge Bagley, Judge Jackson, they've constantly given of their time. And there are a couple of things that I do want to say in closing that I think are important. But for most people, it said there are two things that you can look at to tell what's important to them. And that is their checkbook or their bank statement. And the other thing is their calendar. For those of you who are here tonight, you've given of your time, perhaps because you're concerned about a child. Maybe you're concerned about a grandchild. Maybe you're concerned about someone else's child. But we thank you for giving of your time because you have demonstrated that this is important. For others, they've given of their money, and we greatly value for that. Bradley, we thank you for talking about identifying those stages and those issues that people will go through that somehow or the other we get in denial about, and we don't recognize the importance of early intervention and being involved and knowing what those signs are about. Sherry, as I looked into the audience tonight as you were speaking, I could see that you giving of your heart touched into the heart of what perhaps are roughly 500 people that I've estimated in this room. But thank you for giving your heart to us tonight, and we give our heart and our love to you. Daniel, we thank you from a young person's standpoint. As I'm sitting there thinking about you at your point, I think about my own children. And I think about the fact as you're at that age, very well could have been them. But you've talked about the fact that something that's very important for all of us to recognize, that there's hope. And John Maxwell has said, where there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. And because there's hope in the future for the children of Forsyth County, there's a tremendous amount of power in this room. And I hope that we don't leave here tonight with a lack of commitment to ensuring that for the future, our community and the future of our young people, and hopefully making the lives of those people who are here in the uniforms and those who are here representing our legal system tonight, that we actually make their lives easier. But what can I say in closing that I think really, really is important? As I've indicated, two things are important to us: time and money. I've heard that quoted for many years. And as parents, I guess what I encourage you to think about, even though this is not certainly a sure thing, but I've heard it said for a long time that if you know the 90% rule, that's one step of information that will be on your side. But if you know who and where your children spend 90% of their time with, and where they spend 90% of their money, I think you will have some idea of what's going on in your children's life. Finally, and I hope not, but it's a very good possibility that for some of you along the way, there may be someone in your child's life who is an employee of the Forsyth County school system. Tonight, I've been heartened to see a number of counselors, psychologists, school administrators, school board members, and it's been alluded to tonight, people who spend an awful lot of time with your children. In fact, spend more time with your children than you spend with your children. So if someday one of our personnel comes to you and wants to have a conference with you and says, we're concerned about your behavior, please don't get mad at us. Please understand it's because we love your children. And when we see things taking place in their life that don't add up with them being successful in our environment, we feel a sense of calling to come together. And perhaps we've gotten it wrong. But if we did, please forgive us and just understand it's because we care deeply about your children. There's one thing that we would like to ask you to do as you leave tonight is we do have evaluations that are on your table. As we plan future opportunities and future educational programs for our community, we need to know what's important to you. So if you will just take a couple of minutes to fill out those evaluations, you can leave them on the table, and we'll take those and process those. And we commit to you that we will debrief about your comments and about what you found of value. So again, I want to thank you for your time, because your time tonight has demonstrated that this is an important topic. Thank you for being here. God bless each of you, and God bless Forsyth County, Georgia. Thank you. Okay. We have 3 baseballs to give away tonight, and we'll draw very, very quickly. And the first one that we're going to give away is to Denise Buchanan. Denise. second one that we'll give away is to Scott Wilbanks. Scott? And our third and final baseball, Gail Nearing. Gail?
Thank you again for coming, and if you've got any questions, feel free to come up here. Thank you so much. Oh, and I was supposed to mention, there is a new foundation. Joanne Daniel brought some things out on the table. They suffered a loss in their family due to prescription drug overdose, and they've started a foundation. They've got pamphlets out on the table that tells you a lot about prescription drugs and things and signs to watch for, and she can get more of those for you if you need them in your business. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you.